Here's a question for you, Ryan. This will get us warmed up. A founder says, I'm pretty much finished my first MVP minus payments and have 3 potential customers, kudos, who are willing to test the MVP and give me feedback. The product is a B2B SaaS for commercial real estate investors and brokers to find properties and meet their needs in terms of municipal zoning. It is designed to fit between existing solutions and word of mouth. I intend to pivot the product according to the feedback from the 3 people. Always good to be open. Where do I go from here?
You go to market probably, but I guess it depends on what the feedback from the 3 folks at the MVP stage is. More so, one of the things I would want to know is how did we derive this product in the first place? Was this our imaginings? Did we go out here? You know what I'm going to do now, Ed? I'm going to hold up my Bible here, the mom test. Did we go and talk to customers? Did we interview customers? Did we understand the specific challenges that real estate investors and brokers have when they're trying to find properties, right? And how much of an issue is zoning for them, right? All of these things. Presumably this has been done. I'm going to assume this has already been done. Yeah, so one of the things I'd be curious about is to understand what makes us think we're going to get something that would qualify as pivotable data based off of 3 data points. I'd be a little concerned that we're going to pivot product based on 3 users. Doesn't sound like a lot to me unless there's some really marked feedback or something that we missed during the customer interview process. So I guess from a where do I go from here standpoint, let's just assume that all of that happens to plan, right? That we built the product that the market wanted more or less. We're going to MVP it with 3 players. So here's a pro tip. As you get those folks into that MVP and they begin to use it, don't simply observe casually. Have a plan for the story you want to be able to tell when they are done, because these should be feedback, but what else should this be? This should be testimonial. This should be referral. This should be success stories, whether they want their names attached to it or not. There should be some outcomes from this that were positive. The challenge that I always run into with founders is that they go looking for these things after the fact. They conduct some experiments and then they look backwards and go, okay, now what can we make out of it? Instead of saying, here's what we'd like to be able to tell at the end of this. Here's the story we'd like to be able to tell. Here's how much faster the search was. Here's how much quicker the deal landed. Here's how much happier the brokers were, how much less resource they had to apply to get to the point of doing diligence on a deal and closing a deal. Whatever those pain points are, I'm making stuff up right now. But we want to be able to illustrate that to the next 3 users and the next 30 users and the next 300 users, the next 3,000 users. So as you're going through this MVP, don't leave it up for chance that story gets told. Make sure that you construct the engagement with these folks in a way that builds the constituent pieces of those stories from now, and you will be a much happier founder 2-3 months from now when this pilot wraps up.
Okay, I appreciate you saying that because I never would have even gone there. That's why you're the expert, and we're having you talk the most.
I have just made all these mistakes and then look back with deep regret.
Okay. So. But kudos to this founder. Let's get granular here. The chat says, yes, this product was conceptualized by listening to their problems and interviews. Fantastic. Biggest pain point was zoning. Fantastic. We're taking for granted that that's the problem that you're trying to solve. Now, Ryan, I want to backtrack here. All right. So let's walk through this scenario. They listened, they built it, and now they have 3 potential customers said, I'm willing to test the MVP and give feedback, which I really like. So when this founder is going to go contact them, how does this founder set that up to get that story or to make sure that we don't have false positives? We're using principles from the mom test. Walk us through how you would couch that test.
Sure. So I guess we always want to start with what are we trying to validate, right? So for me, MVP is about validation. I think some people think it's like, can we just stand up a product? That's not what you're trying to do with an MVP. You're trying to validate some of your core assumptions, all right? So presumably at this point, based on the information we have, one of the assumptions that we're probably trying to validate is that we make it easier to find those things, right? So that truly we make it easier to find properties that align with the zoning needs of a particular client, deal, whatever it is that's happening. So we want to make sure that we have visibility on that, right? So we're going to want to understand a couple things before people come in, like how long does this usually take you? How much time do you usually spend on this? Right. Good. So again, we got to have some sort of a metric. Are we looking for a pass fail here? Are we just looking for qualitative data? Is there quantitative data to be had? Things like time, money spent, or deals lost because we weren't able to find something properly zoned. So zoning, while I understand that zoning was the pain point identified, zoning isn't actually the pain point, right? It's one of the hurdles, one of the blockers. Pain point is presumably lost time, lost money, lost deals, something else. So what's the thing behind the thing?
Like the friction.
And what are we validating on the back end? So what is the value provision, right? And so this is something, it's amazing to me. But again, I did this many times before I figured out how to get it right. One of the things the MVP should be trying to do is validate value. Oftentimes what we're trying to do is validate, will people pay for it? Well, that tells us you built a good marketing trap, but if there's no value provided after the fact, what have we built? Not a business, right? Not one that will continue. Are we trying to validate product features? Okay, stuff works, but we don't need clients to do that. You can do usability testing in a lot of ways to make sure that stuff doesn't break. So that's not really it either. What we should be trying to validate is value. If the clients come in, use this B2B SaaS as intended, does it provide them with the transformation or outcome that they expected? Which means one thing for certain, we got to make sure, what is that expectation? What are they wanting to get from this? And sometimes that gets missed as well.
Okay, I want to highlight that. I'm going to tell you a story, Ryan, because I just went through this.
I like stories.
Yeah.
Is this a fantasy story or is this a real story?
It has
now I'm going to wonder every single time.
It has to do with fantasy writing. Thank you very much for asking and paying attention. Ryan, I love you. Okay, so I have this problem as a fantasy author with beta readers. A founder out there knew I had this problem, contacted me and said, I created an MVP to solve your problem of getting beta readers for your fantasy novel. And I said, fantastic. And I said, I'll test the MVP. They sent it to me and they just sent it to me and they just say log in. And I look at it and I got to tell you, it was so messy. There's so many buttons and so many different things to do that I just got lost. I didn't know what I was testing or validating. I didn't even know if this solved my problem. Like, it just had everything in there. And I literally had to go back to the founder because I'm an advisor and I want to help the founder, right? Most customers aren't even going to do this, right?
Nope. You will never hear from them again.
Yes. So I went back and I said, I'm very confused. What exactly am I testing? What do you want to know? What insight, what data point do you need from me? And they gave me that thing. And the other issue was it's so hard to even get to that. And they just said, I just want to know if you can do this. And I said, thank you for simplifying that for me. And you could have made the MVP just straightforward, but I understand founders get that way, right? So that's my story in terms of they could have done a better job in getting that story from me.
Yeah, it's exactly. You want to make sure that you're teeing them up for success with the platform, both in terms of understanding of how to use it, what the expectations are, what they should be trying to do, and is it truly just a test? Right? Is there something specific you want them to test, or is it just sort of like, I want you to just go use this and let's see if we get to value. And again, don't leave that up to chance. I would say I'd be staying really close in terms of usage with these folks. I would play the role of the success manager with these first three if I'm the founder. I would be in there helping them understand how to use it, seeing where it goes right, seeing where it goes wrong. We talked about this before, but looking at simple behavioral analytics and sort of like whatever touch points and push buttons are, leaves a lot to be desired, right? Like if that founder had sat and watched you try to navigate that MVP, imagine how much they would have learned as they saw like the look of concern go across your face, the where the hell do I go next, the what do I click, what do they even want me to do, right? All of a sudden you learn a ton. Just a caveat to all of that, that was a miss on the part of that founder, in my opinion, because there should have been some basic usability testing done.
Yes.
It doesn't need to be conducted by an actual client. It's a waste of a client interaction, in my opinion. Make sure that somebody, with some level of, they don't have to have the same knowledge that your user has, but you're talking about stuff, Ed, that was just basic SaaS usage.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right? You're talking about stuff that was just like, it's hygiene factor table stakes at this point, right? If people can't figure out the path or they weren't told the path, that's a problem. Figure that stuff out first before you put live fire clients into an exercise.
That's right. And I'll just be very honest. I'm not as motivated anymore because there's already friction put in, right? So you don't want to lose that. Now, Ryan, this is my next question to you because I've seen two things occur. One, it's like what I experienced. Here's the MVP. I want you to know if you can do this. See you later. Have fun. Let me know later. I'll follow up with you in a week. Then there's I want to watch you go through it and I'll be a voice on your shoulder and say, okay, see that button, push it, and then do this, and then do that. And I've been part of that where I've been micromanaged to that. What's the best way to approach them actually testing once you let them know your objective?
Let's split the difference between those 2 points. We don't want to just leave them on their own. We also don't want to micromanage them. Maybe, unless that's what they want or need. So I think it will depend a little bit on the objective and the outcome. If this SaaS is relatively straightforward and very, very focused, especially if the MVP, and it should be, right? So if we're just trying to validate a single point of value, which is, can we help them better identify the zoning requirements or the zoning types prior to further evaluation of the deal so they don't end up evaluating deals that can't be done, then we need to provide them enough support that they can get through that. Remind yourself, this is an MVP. So I'm definitely not as concerned with like usability. Now I'm concerned with basic usability.
Sure.
But we're not looking for like, is the workflow completely streamlined and perfect? And is the UX clean and polished and all that? I want to understand, did we make it simple enough for them to jump through whatever the hoops they have to jump through? And did they get the cookie at the end? Right? Were they able to navigate the course and get the prize? So were they able to get properly zoned locations that they can then move forward with the deal? So again, it's gonna depend a bit on what exactly you're trying to validate as to how much hand-holding needs to be done.
Perfect.
But the hand-holding is less about the tool and more about the acquisition of value for the user. We want to make sure that we are there to support them through getting the value. We have all the time in the world to iterate on the product, add features, add buttons, remove buttons, change colors, do all that stuff. But none of it matters if they go and do the things that we told them to do. They get to the outcome and they go, well, I jumped through the hoops. I got the cookie. This cookie kind of sucks, right? That's the problem. That's the first thing that needs to be addressed. I see so many people end up like they're belling and whistling and they're honing and polishing on a thing that no one actually cares about the outcome from. So we got to get them to the outcome, make sure they're really excited about that.
Sometimes the founder tells you you're going to get a chocolate chip cookie at the end of this. You're super excited, and then you end up with oatmeal, and you're just like, what is this? So
wait, was it an oatmeal cookie or just oatmeal?
Well, a half-baked oatmeal cookie, you might as well put in a bowl, okay?
Yeah, okay.
But
I don't want that.
Now, here's how I like to do it, Ryan. I like to take it from assumptions. So if I've built an MVP, I say, my assumption is that a user is going to come in and see the green button, press it, and then because they want, plug in all the factors for the chocolate chip cookie, and then they can actually say, yeah, you gave me a chocolate chip cookie at the end of this. And I'm prepared for the bad news. If it doesn't happen, that's fine. But that leads to the next question. And I'm just asking on behalf of this founder, like, founder, I hope you're okay with me asking all the questions I'd be asking, right? And I struggled through. So Ryan, after the test, how then do you get that information to determine whether you do need to pivot or improve or everything's hunky-dory? How do you get that information?
Sure. Well, I think you set the stage. So if this is truly, because this sounds like there are people waiting to provide feedback, right? This isn't just like kind of three random customers. These are people that they've sort of teed up as kind of a friendly test, let's say. So we want to make sure that they understand what those rules of engagement are up front and that they will be providing feedback. And here's what I want you watching out for. Here's what we're trying to achieve. And then you're just going to go back and you're going to talk to them again. You're going to mom test it again. You're going to ask some of the same questions that led you to build this thing in the first place and find out, were those pain points soothed? Was the desired objective achieved? And was it achieved in a way that was comfortable to the user, feels like it provided ROI, whether that's on time or money or outcome, right? It depends again on like what the blocker was, right? When we talked about this, but the zoning isn't the issue. Zoning blocking a deal is an issue. So were deals blocked previously from getting done? Did a deal now get done because we properly selected something with the right zoning? Right? I'm making up the scenario here, of course. Like the founder's probably giggling right now, listening to me. Like that has nothing to do with this, right? But just for purpose of illustration, this is what we want to know. I want to go back to something that you said, Ed, which is around the assumptions piece.
Yeah.
And this is what I was driving at a bit earlier around, we want to be validating something. Right? So we're validating the assumption. One of the things that I see get missed with the MVPs a lot is, what are we actually validating? We pick the wrong question sometimes, and so we end up with the wrong data and we start to make the wrong decisions based on that. It is really important to consider what you're trying to validate. I always try to start with the things that are like the binary go, no-go gates, right? So for example, if you use this tool to find deals with proper zoning, and that's the outcome that you need, and you don't find any, right? That's a problem, right? For example, like, oh, well, we're unable to actually normally source a deal for people. That's a big problem because you can't build a business around one that can't provide the actual solution, right? So, or is it, can we provide them in a timely manner? Can we provide them in an accurate manner? What is it we're trying to validate that would make the business either work or not work, right? Sometimes it's about, will people even ever pay for this? Or is this just a nice to have, right? So if we're worried about that, we might want to work out how we can get people to pay for some version of this, whether it's a service or a product or something early on, if payment becomes the big binary gateway that keeps us from being able to move forward, right? I've talked to founders who, when I looked at their products, I was like, I'm pretty sure that you're trying to violate physics here. So let's make sure that we can do this before we move forward with the business. Because if you can't figure out how to actually make this thing do, then the rest of it doesn't matter, right? If there's going to be something that will completely hamstring the business or kill it, that's a really good thing to validate as early as you can.
I'm going to ask you to repeat a lot of the great nuggets because I'm trying to lay it out for the founder here. Let's just set it up that the assumption is a user's going to go click the green button, enter some stuff and get some zoning or whatever the outcome. It is either validated or invalidated. And walk me through, Ryan, the two scenarios. One, it gets invalidated. What do you do?
Sure.
And just lay it out. And then the next one, which I really liked what you said, thinking about the next 3 users, et cetera. Let's say it does get validated. It works. Hooray, huzzah.
Yeah.
Now what do you do?
We turn that into evidence. So let's start with the first one. So if we're trying to validate something like the first thing that you laid out was actually a technical validation. We don't need customers for that, right? We don't necessarily need customers for that. We would need customers for a qualitative piece of that, and I'll explain what I mean. So if I go in and someone should be able, for my team, should be able to go in, click the button, specify the needs of the project, hit go, and get some results. Now, as a technical team, we should be able to see, did it actually produce results? Were they accurate? That's great. We don't need a customer to validate that.
Great.
Where we might need a layer of customer validation on that simple outcome is, do those feel like reasonable results? Would they meet my needs? That's something that as a tech team we can't actually say.
Do they have value in the wild, in a real
Correct.
scenario?
Right. If I look at those and I go, yeah, okay, those all meet the zoning requirements, but they're all in the wrong parts of town, or the prices are wrong, whatever it is, right? So that might tell you, okay, so we need some more filtration criteria. We need to give people better ability to green zone and red zone areas within the map, so that they're only pulling deals that they would actually consider based on their specific location. Maybe it's not just a zip code or a radius. Maybe we actually need to be able to like redline certain areas and say like, okay, we don't want anything in that district, we don't want anything here. You start to learn from that, right? So the qualitative feedback at that level would be important, right? Because again, if we keep producing results, this is exactly goes back to value provision. If we keep producing technical results, it puts out 10 choices for me every time, but none of those 10 choices are good for me as the user based on my internal criteria. Not the things that I could specify on the screen and pick the buttons and then hit go. When it comes down to now, I need to go do the deal, whatever the nuanced pieces are. So then, to your question, what do we do with that feedback? It depends. Is there a technical solution for that, right? Or are we up against something where it's like, no matter how good of a list we deliver based on the criteria that are available to us, based on the things that we can use, publicly discoverable data, privately discoverable data, whatever we're using to derive these results, can we get to a level that's good enough to satisfy the user? If not, that's one of those binary go, no-go gates. We have to go, well, we were not able to technically solve the challenge for our users. Back to drawing board. We're either going to scrap the project or we're going to go solve a different kind of problem because we can't do this. In the case where it was validated, we want to move on to that one?
Well, I want to just point out something that you said triggered this thought. Sometimes, Ryan, we trip over things we didn't know. Like we put it out there. And
sometimes.
Like I've had users go in and try and do some really weird things I never even imagined. Or suddenly everyone goes, this seemed like such a great idea, but what we didn't know was this was a factor. There's a nuance that nobody predicted. And then you're just kind of like, oh my goodness, like either I've been barking up the wrong tree, but you're also really grateful to get that insight. And that could be a result of the process exactly as you're describing.
Yeah, so it comes down to some really fine detailed nuance, right? Like in this case, let's just say it's something like it's surfacing really cool buildings, but all of them, let's say that we're looking for something that could be zoned for a child education center. Okay, cool. Brings up 10 results. All 10 of them happen to be within 2 storefronts of a liquor store, a gun shop, or a smoke shop.
Sure.
And there, ergo, the client won't say yes to it, so it doesn't work for me. Now, that's nuance that we wouldn't have been able to see as we're thinking about the criteria, and maybe we can't even specify that. So this is the kind of thing where at the end of the day, it has to deliver a result. The user has to be able to take the result and derive value from it, right? So the specifics of that are very complicated, right? But the understanding of that simple 3-part mechanism is quite easy, I think.
Okay, so now scenario B, which I hope happens for this founder.
Yes.
Validation, yay. What's next?
What's next? So we take the validation, we try to understand, was there anything that could still have been improved, right? Did they say, this was great, but we had to look through 20 offerings to get to the 10 that we actually needed. Okay, so we could do some additional filtration, or maybe we deliver smaller lists, or maybe they said, look, we actually had to run 2 or 3 queries to get all that we wanted. It'd be nice if we could combine those. So there's almost always, very rare that we just get pure validation. It's almost always yes, but, or yes, and, right? Like, okay, we got what we wanted, but here's some nuance. So we'll want to act on any of the nuance. We'll want to talk to them and understand, like, what else could we have improved? You don't want to miss those opportunities, right? Even if they say, yes, this worked, great. But the bigger piece here is we want to capture that momentum. We want to capture that value and really start to try to quantify it and qualify it in a way that speaks to those next 3 users, and then the next 30, the next 300, right? So it is now saying we went from taking 5 hours to conduct zoning searches to 5 minutes. We went from 3 weeks to find appropriately sign off on a deal that was able to move then to close, right? whatever those target goals are, the big things. And again, they should map back to these conversations that you had during the customer interviews, and it should map back to the problems that they had, because those problems should map to the rest of the user's problems. All right, so this is where we get to go into that lovely reversal of, again, we have problem and solution, where it showed the problem was here, then it was completely reversed, and now we're in better condition. We want to go tell that story in a real way to subsequent users. So it's just about now packaging the stories, again, using their language, putting them in the places where they hang out, right? So now we're just straight into marketing, right? But we're going to use this as one of the pieces of communication.
And you're saying you literally go out and tell the next 3 customers, hey, your colleagues over here used it this way, this result, here's their testimonial, here's their case study. Like, you are that upfront with that.
Yeah. It does not need to be more complicated than that. In fact, it shouldn't be, because this is what most people are looking for, right? When we go to buy something, of course we want the transformation. What are we trying to avoid? Wasting time, wasting money, looking foolish, right? And so if we can see somebody else who looks a lot like us, who did this thing already, who got the result we wanted and avoided the things that we want to avoid, we feel that much more comfortable. So we're simultaneously lowering all of the barriers to purchase. Analytical, financial, emotional, psychological, just makes it that much easier for the next person to say yes.
Let me offer a pro tip for those of you out there, because I see you in the audience. If you're raising money, here's how we bring these two worlds together. Yeah. I heard from an investor one time. He said, Ed, I normally don't invest in pre-seed, but I invest in this one. And I said, that's interesting. So what happened? He said, during the pitch, gave me the pitch, and it was a B2B SaaS. And he said, I have called and talked to 1,000 customers. Potential customers. And he was like, that's crazy that you can even go get that. And then by the end, the founder didn't even ask for money, said, don't take my word for it. Here are the names and numbers of these fancy logos and these people who've already tested it and who will give me a reference. Call them first. And I thought, wow, that is awesome. And that just kind of lines up with what you're talking about is don't just set up for the next 300, but the next 3 investors, the next 30 investment presentations that you do, they all can work together.
This is why it's so important to think about, again, that story that you want to tell. So if the next important story you need to tell is to investors, make sure that you're capturing information that will be compelling to them. Think about the story that they need to hear and the way that they need to hear it. Maybe that founder did it was very clever. Sometimes that might work. It depends on the type of product that you're building and selling. But clearly they did all the things that we just talked about, right? Yeah. They sort of knew the story they wanted to tell. They clearly validated the value, right? They were able to validate value because that is what the customers will be willing to talk about, right? They're going to say, here's what happened to us, right? We used to be like this, then we use this, now we're this much better, right? And that's the story that they're going to tell that investor and be willing to share.
Furthermore, he had those customers agreeing to the price point and how they were going to purchase it even before the product was made. Like, I'm talking pre-product, pre-seed, right? Man, when we say investors invest in founders, we're not kidding. Like, you show that rocket fuel in your veins, you show that relentless resourcefulness, that passion, that conviction, investors are going to pay attention, and that's the key. So, hey, founder out there who sent us this, I hope it answered your questions. Really appreciate you allowing us to beat that up because it allows us to share with everybody else. We got to thanks, guys. That's great.